So yeah, this is kind of like the point where things are starting to shift in my life. So last video I kind of talked to the point of like my mom passing away and then kind of the shift in relationship with my dad. I'm going to talk a little bit more about like how that affected my relationship. So I'm in my mid-20s. I'm relatively young at this point too, so I just want to keep that in mind. I talked to my ex about like not showing up for me with my mom and kind of explain like how hurtful that was, that he kind of abandoned me in that space to kind of deal with his solo. And at that point he kind of like was very apologetic and very much of like, no, I want to be there to support you, I care about you, like what can I do to kind of help, and really did it his best to kind of smooth that over. But I think there was like this underlying piece of like, wow, like he really just left me out in the cold to deal with this. And I mentioned the night that I passed away, like I was obviously distraught, and he just went to sleep and he was like, I have to work in the morning, and like left me alone in the closet crying that night. So yeah, it was not a good situation. So when I came back, we had that conversation, his words were very assuring, but what I didn't really know at this time for relationships, and did not have good role models, was to also be aware of actions. So the relationship started to obviously get more serious as time progressed. We ended up moving to a different place and getting a housemate, which is one of my really close friends. And so like now I've met his family, he's met my friends, and so we kind of like started on this track together, right? And maybe a few years, 2 years after my mom passed away, we got our first dog together, and then a year after that we got our second dog. So we have a place together. Yes, we have a housemate, but we have a place together. We've been together for quite a while, and really the major kind of issue in our relationship is just his emotional availability, meaning that I'm having to ask for like emotional support and like assurance in that space. And partially I'm going to like say that like I was very insecure, right? I talked about that at the very beginning of this, and that right before this relationship I was coming out of a mindset, or I was so much in the mindset that like I was not going to be sought after by many people. And so I really like invested in this relationship because I didn't think I was going to have very many suitors and options, right? And I probably shouldn't have been vocal with that with my partner, but I was. So he also was aware of that. So the main piece of our relationship would be that we would have like disagreements or fights, and he would stonewall. He would just completely shut down, shut out, and not talk to me. And then the other thing I started to notice is that he was never wrong. Like nothing, he could never admit fault to anything, even like a small thing like, hey, did you leave this out on the counter? There was never any like an accountability for that, right? It was kind of always spun around me. And I'm kind of starting to notice some of these things. But the other piece of this is like, he's a really good person. He's really kind. My friends like him. His family is nice, right? And so I'm kind of like seeing this duality and a little confused, right? And at this point, he's promising me like, no, I really want to be with you. Like he's consistent with that he wants to be with me. He wants to make things work. And so I'm taking his word for it. We ended up having a pretty big argument at some point. I think this was before we got the dogs, and like again stonewalling, shutting down. And like for me, my reaction to that, because I had an anxious attachment, was to like over explain, over talk, over try to get a reaction and response, right? And so we're kind of having this push pull. And finally, I'm kind of like, yeah, I don't think this is working. I think we need to like go our separate ways. And that's kind of a pivotal moment because at that point, he promised me that he's going to work on things, and he shares some history that's really important that will come back later in the story that I really probably should have paid attention a little bit more to, because that should have been my reasoning for at that point of like, this is not going to work for us. But me being naive and really wanting, you know, after seeing my family history, right, really wanting to have like a good relationship and to be happy, I think I glossed over some of these pieces. So I'm going to talk about that in the next video.